In tonight's Dateline Defense, tough talk from Syrian President Bashar Assad. In an interview with Russia Today TV, Assad rejected an offer from the British Prime Minister granting him safe passage out of Syria if he guaranteed an end to the country's civil war. Assad says he will never leave and that he will never be a puppet of the West. For analysis, we turn to our guest tonight on Capitol Insider, retired U.S. Air Force Colonel Cedric Leighton, president of Cedric Leighton Associates. So, Cedric, Britain is now holding direct talks with the opposition. U.S. officials are considering a similar move. Should they?
Well, I think so, Morris, and I think the way it should work is that we should be very much in sync with British efforts and other efforts in order to get the opposition, first of all, unified, and secondly, make sure that their unified effort, if we can develop one of those, is actually focused on getting Assad out of Damascus.
Now, Iran banned the import of so-called luxury goods today. They want to save billions of dollars in hard currency. Is this further evidence that the U.S. sanctions over Iran's nuclear program are working?
Yes, in part. And what it means is, of course, that from a currency perspective, they can't do what they wanted to do. They're losing foreign currency reserves. That's why they banned the import of luxury goods. And they want to save those foreign currency reserves for more important things, such as possibly foodstuffs, possibly importing oil, because actually Iran has to import refined oil. And then they also want to make sure that they can have enough reserve currency in case they want to buy more weapons. So it's in their interest to do that. But the problem that they have is that they really can't break the sanctions right now. Could have a major effect on the upper middle class in Iran, and that's a class that has really been looking forward to a lighter sanctions regime and also an effort to really get into a more normal relationship with the West, which of course Ahmadinejad has not been able to provide them.
That's right. Now, a few minutes ago, Cedric, we mentioned the transition of power in China. Today, outgoing President Hu Jintao warned Communist Party leaders they need to clean up corruption or face collapse. What does this transition mean for the U.S.?
Well, it's going to be very interesting, Morris, because I think this transition is one of the most critical transitions that the Chinese have experienced in many years. They are very, very careful at orchestrating these transitions, and what they're trying to do is they're trying to respond to the U.S.'s switch to the Asia-Pacific realm. The National Defense Strategy calls for more emphasis in Asia-Pacific, and they're responding to that. And you'll also note that many of the new military figures, the new military leaders in China, are actually Air Force personnel. That's a direct response to the United States' efforts to engage in the Pacific realm, and of course our preponderance of power in the Pacific is based on naval and air power, and that's going to be the Chinese response to that effort as well.
And new developments in the case against U.S. Army Private Bradley Manning. He's agreed to plead guilty on some offenses for sending government secrets to WikiLeaks, but he's pleading not guilty to more serious offenses like aiding the enemy. Which side has a tougher row to hoe in the court, the defense or the prosecution, Cedric?
Well, in these situations, it's very similar to a civilian court where the burden of proof is on the prosecution. So what the prosecution has to prove is that the information that Bradley Manning allegedly released to the WikiLeaks website actually ended up in the hands of the enemy, or could have reasonably ended up in the hands of the enemy. They should be able to do that, but it's still up to them to prove that.
And finally, a strange case out of Portland, Maine. A former shipyard worker pleaded guilty today for setting fire to a $450 million nuclear submarine, the USS Miami. Casey Fury told the court he had anxiety and set the fire because he wanted to go home. How can the military prevent something like this from happening?
Well, no method is foolproof for preventing something like this, Morris, but what you're looking at here is what's known as an insider threat. We have them in cyberspace. We also have them in the physical realm. And what you have here in the case of this gentleman is a case where somebody who is discontented at work is going to act out, and it becomes very, very important for the entire military chain of command, whether it's on the military side or in the civilian contractor world, to ensure that they understand exactly what's going through the minds of all their workers. A very, very hard thing to do, and it is one of those areas where, you know, a lot of things can go wrong, especially in the case of a $450 million sub. You don't want that to happen, and this is one of a few times in history that something like that has occurred, but it's really an insider threat issue, and that's where you have to be persistently vigilant to safeguard against such security lapses.
Colonel Cedric Leighton hitting the headlines for us tonight. Thanks for being with us.
My pleasure, Morris. Thanks for having me.